Hello, and welcome to an overview of Change Management Basics. My name is Francesca, and I'm the Consumer Training Lead and Content Manager for OCM Solution. I'll be taking you through today's presentation. By the end, you should have a good idea of the purpose of change management support for a project and be able to explain that to others. You'll also learn a repeatable change management workflow that you can use to boost your OCM success. First, what is change management, also known as Organizational Change Management or OCM? Change management involves applying a structured change methodology to manage the people side of change. But what do we mean by the people side of change? The people we're talking about are those that will be impacted by a project. This could be employees, customers, vendors, or another stakeholder group. Any project that impacts the way people do things requires those people to adopt something new, to change something in their normal habits and workflow. People need help and guidance to adopt those changes successfully. Change management is all about providing that help and guidance so project adoption can succeed successfully. We need to start from a basic understanding of human nature. People don't like to change. They don't like to change their workflows or habits that they're used to. As we adopt habits, that activity becomes easier. For example, say you're learning how to enter customers into a new CRM. When you first learn, it will take longer and seem harder. But after entering those names week in and week out, you'll develop a routine. It becomes comfortable. Your brain doesn't need to think about all the steps any longer. You know them intuitively because they're now a habit. People don't like to change the habits that they're comfortable with. This is normal and expected behavior. Change management teams understand that resistance to change is natural. What they do is engage with the impacted individuals and groups to resolve that natural resistance so the project can achieve the expected adoption. Now, one of the basic theories of change management comes from Kurt Lewin. His change management model is based on the habits we just discussed and how people get frozen in those old ways of doing things, whether it be a process, software, system, culture, or something else. Change management unfreezes those old behaviors. It transitions people through awareness, training, and other forms of engagement to teach them the required new behaviors. Then it ensures those new behaviors are refrozen. In other words, they become the new normal, the new habits. Okay, so let's take that from concept to the real world. Imagine that the old frozen behavior is using sticky notes for task management. Now that's not very efficient because those sticky notes can easily get lost. They also can't be searched like tasks in a cloud platform. So the organization introduces a project to move everyone to a new digital task management system, which is supposed to increase productivity by making task management more efficient. The change managers let the users know about the upcoming changes, address questions and concerns, and facilitate their transition through various forms of engagement. Once the new digital system goes live, change management provides additional support. The team watches for resistance and needed training. They help users adopt the new, more efficient way to manage tasks. In other words, they refreeze doing tasks in the software as the new normal. So what happens if there were no change management? Say the project team just deployed the digital task management software and leadership just expected everyone to start using it. Sound familiar? Well, as you may have guessed, a lot of people will go running back to their sticky notes and abandon the software for various reasons. Some may find it too hard to use and were never trained properly. Another may think it makes their job harder, so they choose to stay with what they know. There are multiple reasons for user resistance. And because there was no change management, there was no resistance mitigation. So the project fails, and productivity doesn't go up because a majority of the impacted stakeholders aren't using the new system. Project management can deploy a solution successfully with everything working correctly. But if users aren't using that solution, then the project fails. This is often what happens when there is no adequate change management. Users go back to their old habits that are more comfortable. Many organizations have historically defined project success as when the project solution is successfully deployed. But as we just discussed, if you build it, there's no guarantee people will use it. Remove people from the project success equation and companies don't meet projected ROI expectations. Looking at the project steps, you have your project idea, then the project is planned, and the project is deployed. You can see why if you stop here, it's going to be hard to reach the project benefits and ROI. True project success depends on people adopting the solution the project is designed to provide. Thus, you need the critical user adoption step to reach the payoff. It takes two to tango in change management, or in this case, two teams to make a project successful. The project management side, which is the deployment success, and the change management side, which is the adoption success. Project teams are responsible for designing, developing, testing, delivering, and maintaining solutions. Change management teams are responsible for helping impacted end users embrace, adopt, and become proficient in using those new solutions. Now let's go a level deeper. What do change management teams do? Ultimately, they get people ready for project deployment, also known as the go-live date. They engage with impacted stakeholders to ensure they can successfully adopt and sustain the changes. Two key goals that drive change management are get people ready to adopt the changes by the project's go-live date and ensure those changes are sustained or refrozen as the new normal. So what do people need to be ready? Well, there are 5 key attributes that point to users successfully being ready to adopt the changes a project requires. First, there's awareness. People have to be aware a change is happening at all. Acceptance. This is also known as support. People have to be accepting of making the changes they're required to make. Capacity. People have to have the time to learn the things they need to learn to successfully adopt the changes. Knowledge. People need a basic knowledge of what is changing and what they need to do differently. And then there's training. Certain projects will require formal training where people need to learn, say, a new process or a new software. When you're using the OCM Solution Change Readiness Toolkit, you'll have surveys you can use to collect these 5 KPIs. Whether users have a high, mid, or low level of any of these KPIs will be automatically calculated into an overall readiness score. Now let's talk about the change management readiness cycle. To properly prepare teams for successful project adoption, the readiness cycle is used. It drives engagement activities, also known as readiness activities. The readiness assessment is typically done early in a project to give the change management team a baseline of where impacted stakeholders are. Do they know about the project? Do they have knowledge of what workflow habits will need to change? How are they feeling about the project, positive or not? These are things that the change managers need to know so they can make plans for their engagement activities. The results of the readiness assessment will show readiness gaps. The activities are designed to fill those gaps. So first we start with the readiness survey. It will ask users questions reflecting those KPIs. These can be asked in person or sent out as a digital survey. Based on the survey results, The change management team will then plan engagement activities. Did the survey results show that just about everyone has already heard about the project, but nobody knows what's actually going to change in their workflow? Then that lets the change managers know they don't need to deploy as many initial awareness communications, but they do need to communicate with users about the specifics of what the change will mean to their workflow. So once the activities are planned, they're deployed. Then another readiness check-in is done, another assessment. Where are people now? Hopefully, they'll have more knowledge of what's changing. They'll be closer to being ready. Based on the results of your second readiness assessment, you go through the same cycle. What are the gaps that remain? What activities do we need to do? We deploy the activities, and then we do another readiness assessment to see where we stand. Once your assessment is showing a high readiness score, you know the groups are ready. Now, ideally, this is going to coincide with the project's go-live date. If it doesn't, then the project team, change team, and project sponsors may need to have a conversation about possibly extending the project's go-live date. There are several different types of engagement activities that drive readiness. These include communications, briefings and meetings, training and coaching, resistance mitigation, and more. And more could include something like standing up a network of change champions who can help drive support and understanding of the change in their individual teams. So let's do a recap on the basics of project success. For a project to be successful, you need the project management team to successfully deploy the project solution. This means that technically the solution works as expected. But if that project is impacting anything that people do, you also need change management for the adoption success to ensure that the people actually use the solution that was deployed. Okay, now we're going to pivot from the general overview of change management and what it does to the specific workflow of the change management team. This is the OCM Solution Change Management Framework workflow. It has 5 key phases used to conduct end-to-end change management for a project. First, you have Phase 1, the Assess phase. This is when you're learning about the project and assessing the project's impacts on the organization. Then you have the Develop phase. This is when you're strategizing and developing your change management plans. Next is Phase 3, Deploy. This is when you're engaging with the impacted groups and deploying those change management plans. Next, you have Phase 4, Normalize. You'll notice that this comes after the project's go-live date. This is when you're supporting impacted users and monitoring them for any problems with adoption. And finally, you have the Exit phase, Phase 5. This is largely a housekeeping phase where you're handing off certain resources to those that are taking permanent ownership and writing your final reports on the project. Now we'll go into each of these phases in more detail. First, you're going to initially ramp up on your change tasks. In the OCM Solution platform, you'll have a free change management plan template that's pre-populated with the steps to do this. You're basically going to do things like look at the project charter, look at the project timeline, get a flow of your change management activities based upon the project's parameters. Next, you're going to begin your project risks and successes assessment. This takes a general look at how project management and change management are working together to deliver all the deliverables needed to make the project successful. This is done in the OCM Solution Project Assessment and Risk Tracking Toolkit, which will provide a risk score for each of your basic stages, end to end. Next, you're assessing for impacts. How do you know who to engage with if you don't know who's impacted by the change? So your change impact assessment is going to be looking at the different groups being impacted and the severity of those impacts. Is the impact large, meaning it's going to require more change management support to move the user successfully through the transition? Or is it a low impact, in which case you won't need as much change management engagement? It's important to know how the project's impacting your groups across the organization so you can prioritize and plan accordingly. Once you know your impacted groups, you'll be identifying key stakeholders in those groups. It's not just a nameless department or business unit that you're getting ready for the change, it's the people, the individuals in that department. So your next step will be the stakeholder assessment, which gives you insight into who you need to directly engage with, such as managers, sponsors, team leaders, etc. They are representatives of the group as a whole. You assess and manage the stakeholders to understand things like their level of support, how much influence they have on the project, and their capacity to handle the change. Now, could you put every single stakeholder being impacted into your stakeholder management tool? You could, but if you have 100 or 1,000 different stakeholders being impacted, it's usually not feasible to track and engage with each one individually. Thus, you choose key stakeholders who are the bellwethers of a group, and they can help you get an understanding of how to get the group as a whole transition successfully. Next, you'll be going through that readiness cycle that we just described. You'll be doing that first readiness assessment to get a baseline on how ready your users are for the change. You'll find everything you need to do that in the OCM Solution Change Readiness Toolkit. This includes surveys you can send out to users and then populate into the toolkit to drive your reporting. Resistance management is a key activity in change management. You need to identify who is resistant to the change so you can engage with them. Tell them things like the WIFM or what's in it for me, so you can move them from a resisting state to hopefully a supporting state. You need to move them to a higher level of that acceptance KPI that we saw on the readiness cycle. Communications, of course, will be done throughout change management. In the assess phase, you're beginning your assessment of your communication needs. For instance, you'll be looking at your readiness assessment and your impact assessment. Who is being impacted, meaning who do we need to communicate with, and what do their readiness KPIs look like? How aware are they? Based upon that information, you'll begin starting to draft out your communication plan. Next, you'll be assessing the Change Champion Network. This is that group of peers that can help you drive support for a change on the ground level. People are often more willing to share how they feel about a change with a peer rather than someone they consider a superior. In this phase, you'll be assessing whether the project requires the Change Champion Network to be deployed, and if so, you'll start identifying areas where you will need them. You'll also assess training needs. Is the project one that requires training? If so, what types of training programs need to be done and who needs to take them? Those are the things you're going to plan out and track in the Training Management Toolkit. Finally, you'll assess coaching needs. Coaching may be for sponsors or managers who may not quite understand their role in supporting a change throughout the organization. You may also end up coaching new change agents. So in this phase, you can use the Coaching Management Toolkit to assess and identify those individuals that may need coaching. How would you know? You can get some clues from your stakeholder assessment. For instance, if you have a stakeholder type that's a manager, but that person is showing low support, then they may need some coaching to help them better understand the project, so in turn, their direct reports can also better understand it. So next we go into the develop phase. And this is where you're taking all that information from the assessments and pouring it into your change management strategy and plans. Now, the first step in the phase is to create your strategic change playbook. You can do this using the free tool in the OCM Solution platform. Why not just jump right into the change management plan? Because you first need to outline your strategy of what you will be doing based on your assessments. This will then make it much easier to fill in the blanks when you are creating your full change management plan. Also, this strategic playbook is often presented to leadership, project management teams, and change management teams. It gives them the basics of what is going to happen to prepare the organization for the changes and ensure successful adoption. It's also used to present the results of your assessments. Now, what's one of the best ways to distill down your change management activities into an easy to understand format? Present it in a roadmap. This is another free tool in the OCM Solution platform. It will allow you to show things like your deliverables, milestones, go live date, etc. in a comprehensive timeline. Finally, you'll be creating your full change management plan. This will include things like your communication plan, your training plan, resistance management plan, and more. You'll get lots of tips to help you create that plan in the Change Management Plan template, which is another free tool in the OCM Solution platform. Now we're going into the action phase, deploy. This is when you take that change management plan and you actually start deploying it. You'll notice that you're going to see some toolkits again. That's because many toolkits are used both in the assess phase and in the deployment phase when you're tracking your activities. You'll be delivering your communications and sending them out to the organization. You'll be engaging with stakeholders and tracking how that engagement's going. All the toolkits have comprehensive reporting that give you a gauge on how each activity is going so you can pivot in real time to ensure success and avoid pitfalls. You'll also be working with your Change Champion network. You'll be assigning them tasks which you can track in the Change Champions and Agents Management Toolkit. You'll also be managing resistance to change and then tracking through your reporting how many people you're able to move to a lower resistance or a supporting level. You'll also be delivering training, which you can track in the Training Management Toolkit. You'll be able to track how successfully people are completing training, as well as leverage the post-training feedback surveys in the tool. It's important to understand how people feel about the training, or if they feel they need more training, so you can adjust your change management engagement accordingly to ensure they're properly prepared. You'll also be delivering coaching. The toolkit will allow you to track the success of the coaching of the individuals you identified during the assessment phase. Your readiness cycle will be in full swing during this phase. You'll be doing your subsequent readiness assessments to check in. Are people closer to being ready, or is their readiness score still showing some gaps? The Change Readiness Toolkit is flexible in that you can add as many assessment check-ins as you need. Your reporting is going to pick up each one of those so you can see the progress of your change management activities. You'll also be tracking your project risk and success end-to-end throughout the deploy phase. This allows you to identify any important deliverables that still haven't been delivered. It's important to note that during this Phase 3 deploy phase, many of these activities happen all at the same time. For instance, you're going to be sending communications throughout this phase at the same time that you're delivering training, tracking your change readiness, etc. Next, we're heading into a vital phase for project success, and the phase that can cause many projects to fail if it's not followed successfully. This is Phase 4, normalize. If you think back to the beginning of the presentation, this is the phase that you're refreezing those habits as the new normal. You're going to be tracking adoption success using the Change Metrics and KPI Tracking Toolkit. Do people know where to get help and support? Do they feel ready for the change? How proficient are they? These are the types of things you'll be tracking to help you gauge a group's level of adoption success. You'll also be looking in your change management plan template for other things you do during the normalized phase, such as any additional training that might be needed, additional coaching, rewarding your change champion network for a job well done, etc. All of these activities can be found in the change management plan template. Again, that's a free tool provided by OCM Solution. Finally, we hit Phase 5, the change management exit phase. In our OCM platform, we include a handy transition plan guide and checklist that will check off some of the activities you do. This is largely a housekeeping phase, so you're basically closing out things you don't need anymore, transferring the ownership of documents and guides to the permanent team, etc. You're also writing your final change management report. This post-mortem report should include both successes, things that went well, and things that can be done better in the future. This helps you continually improve your change management process. So how do you incorporate those 5 phases of change management and the various activities when you're actually working in the OCM Solution platform? We've made it easy for you by including this workflow in your main dashboard. When you log into the OCM Solution platform, you'll see My Workflow on the left-hand side. Just click open each phase, and you'll not only see the workflow we just discussed, you can also jump right into the toolkit and project that you're working on. And that completes this Change Management Basics overview. I hope that you found it helpful and insightful. If you'd like to take a deeper look at the OCM Solution platform, we invite you to join one of our weekly live webinars. You'll find a link to join the webinar at the top of our website menu at ocmsolution.com. As always, please feel free to reach out to us with questions anytime. Thanks for visiting OCM Solution. Have a wonderful day.